Hi, and thanks for watching the DIY Daddy channel. My name is Don. This video is going to be about canning, or actually making dilly beans. It's a great way to preserve garden fresh green beans. And this is going to be the first in a few videos of canning that I'm going to put out. So with this recipe, it's right out of the Ball cookbook. It's fairly easy to follow, there's very few ingredients, and it's a really good way to store green beans long term for up to like a year and a half. Keep in mind that you cannot use this method to preserve or can fresh green beans alone. They're just not acidic enough to be preserved. You need a pressure canner for that. So let's take a look at what we need. So we'll take a look at my messy counter here, and what we're going to need is green beans. The recipe in the book calls for 2 pounds, but I'm making a double batch. This is 4 pounds. So keep that in mind. If you're going to make this at home, you can cut everything in half, and it'll come out just fine. Garlic cloves that are peeled. We need cayenne pepper. We need a half a cup of canning salt, which is different than regular salt because it doesn't have iodine in it, and that's important. We've got some fresh dill. We're going to need some vinegar, white vinegar, some water, measuring cups. We're also going to need a pot to make the vinegar mix in, and a canning pot. In this, I've already got my canning jars. I don't know if you can see them in there. Yeah, they're in there. The water's coming. I've just started heating it. The very first step in all this process is to first wash the jars, make sure they're clean, and then start that water boiling in the canner. It's a big pot, so it's going to take a while to boil. But those jars have to be hot before you can fill them with the green beans. Alright, so one of the first steps is to make sure you clean and trim the ends of the green beans. You want to make sure that the ends are both clean. Alright. And then the next thing that we're doing while we're waiting for the canning jar pot to heat up is we're going to mix the vinegar solution, which is what's going to preserve the dilly beans. So what we're going to do is, in a large sauce pot, which is that pot that I have on the corner, we're going to bring the salt, vinegar, and water to a boil. This recipe calls for a half a cup of salt. So if you're only making a half batch, use a quarter cup. We are going to need 5 cups of vinegar and 5 cups of water. So we've got, and now we're going to put that on the burner and bring it up to a boil. Alright, so moving on, I've got the lids, just the flat part, the top, soaking in hot water. That's to soften up the rubber seal that goes around the edge of it. A little, looks like red or orange or brown on your screen. Alright, the jars have been in here at about 150 degrees for a little over 15 minutes now. That's to make sure they're sterile. I'm going to be using these jar tongs to pull them out safely. We have to pack the jars. Now this is the interesting part. So you want to pack the jars as tightly as you can with the beans in there lengthwise. Careful when handling the jar, it is hot. Alright, and they've got to be packed extremely tight. But not only that, you need to have a 1/4 inch of head space. Head space is the space between the top of the jar and the level of the food in there. So sometimes the beans are a little bit too long. You have to trim them a little bit, which is fine. So right now I'm just going to focus on cramming those beans in there. Wide mouth jars are really great to use instead of the regular mouth jars, but I am all out. So you got to pack those things in there. Pack them so tight that you don't think you can pack any more, and when you get to that point, push one more in there. Alright, so now we got these jars packed. The next step is to add the final 3 ingredients before we add the vinegar solution. That's going to be a clove of garlic, so 1 clove per jar. Personally, I like to take a knife and kind of crush it just a little bit. It helps the flavor come out of it. Cram it in there. And then stick it right in the jar. You have to really pack it in there, which is fine. Alright. The next thing is to add a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Right on top. Alright. And finally the dill. So this gets interesting. So you gotta pull off the dill. You don't want to add that big stocky part because it just takes up too much space. Keep in mind that it may be real fluffy right now and hard to get in, but once we pour that boiling vinegar solution on top of it, that dill is going to really compress down and fit in there a lot better. Alright, so the next step is going to be add the vinegar solution. So we're going to take our canning funnel, which I highly recommend you get the stainless steel one, not the plastic one. And we're going to pour the vinegar in, carefully watching the side. You want to make sure that you come up to 1/4 inch from the top. That's about 1/4 inch right there. And if you've done it well, if you've packed it well, it shouldn't take a whole lot of vinegar to fill the jar. And sometimes air bubbles work their way out, so you want to make sure you go back over and top them off. You want to wipe the lid, or the top of it, with a paper towel or something. Alright. And then you carefully place this part onto the top. And you want to make sure that there's nothing between the glass and that rubber seal. Because if there's anything there, it will prevent it from making a seal. It'll go bad, and you can get food poisoning. So you put the thing on, and you put the ring on just finger tight. Right? You don't want it too tight, just a little bit tight. Alright, and now for the final step in the process. We've got our water that's boiling. It was just a rolling boil, but I took the lid off and it cooled off a little bit, but that's fine. So we're going to take our jars and carefully place them in there. You want to make sure that you space them out evenly so that rack or anything doesn't really shake around too much. You also want to make sure that there's a good inch of water over the lid. So now we're going to put the lid back on, set our timer for 10 minutes. Alright, and that's it. You let them sit for 10 minutes, and once that's done, we come back to it. Alright, so now all of those are out, and the last step is just waiting and listening for the pops. Now, each of these lids, on the top, there's this little button that you can see it. The closer it gets to popping, the better it is. But what you got to do is you got to let it sit until that thing pops down. Right? That means it's a successful seal. If it doesn't pop down within like 30 minutes, what you want to do is put it back in the boiling water. You can try and take the top off and readjust the cap, and then put it back in the water for another 10 minutes. It's got to be the full 10 minutes. Because as soon as you take that seal off, you're letting contaminants back into it. Alright, so here we are. You've got the lids. They're pretty much all sealed. This little button on top is down. You'll hear the popping noises. So you want them to cool for a few hours before you do anything to them. A couple other things. One, they'll be ready to eat in about 4 to 6 weeks. That's how long it takes for all those flavors to penetrate the beans. Two, make sure you date them and label them. They'll last in your pantry for upwards of a year and a half. And also, once they're done cooling, this rim, you can take it off, right? Don't try and tighten it on, because when we put it in the boiling pot, it was finger tight. If you try and tighten it harder, you could make that the seal, the piece on top, move and compromise the seal. So it's best to either just leave it finger tight or take it off completely. So that's pretty much it for dilly beans. Alright, so that's it for dilly beans. If you have any questions, put them down here in the comments. Make sure you share, make sure you subscribe and like. I'd appreciate it. Next up, we're going to be making some zesty pickles. Thanks for watching.